I took a lot of pride in being like the only girl on the team. Like I wanted to be the most quantitative. I wanted to be on a quant desk. But I realized like when I actually just didn't enjoy it. So I think really the main con that I had to get over was what other people will think. And I was like, that is a really stupid reason to stay somewhere, is because other people will think that you should have stayed.
Thanks for coming. I've been using 4am Skin, so I'm so excited to like hear the journey.
Thanks for having me. And of course, I had to bring you a re-up, so hope you get to try some more at home.
I needed the re-up. Love the re-up. Thank you. So cute. So walk me through like thank you. It's so sweet. Of course. Walk me through what's the story? Like, how did you actually come up with the idea?
Yeah, so 4am was started by me and my co-founder Sabrina. We were like really good friends from college. We both went to Georgetown in DC, and she had always been a skincare junkie. She was that friend that you went to for skincare advice. I was not that friend, which is just funny. But basically I was 2 years above her in college. I was working for the first time in New York. I was working in finance, pretty bad hours, and for the first time I could really see my skin really taking a hit. So I remember going to her saying, okay, just tell me what to do and I will do it. She came back to me with like this 12-step Korean skincare routine, which I'm sure was an amazing routine. I just knew I wasn't gonna actually end up doing it. But it was kind of that moment where we realized like I wanted to take care of myself, but there was no skincare brand that really touted this like minimalism, less is more approach to skincare that also you could still feel good about. So that was like the very first kind of even spark for 4am. It really didn't start till much later on after that. But that was really the beginning. With 4am, we've really sought to make all-in-one skincare that is research backed, that you can still feel good about. It's luxurious enough to replace the rest of your routine, but also comes with it like a very fun brand that really was honestly just built by like me and her, our both lifestyles of like, skincare doesn't have to be about having a million things in your bathroom. It can really be like honestly the least interesting thing about you. Like we saw all these people who were super busy doing all these different things and wanted to build skincare specifically for them.
Yeah, well, I really resonate with the 4am because I cannot even tell you how many times I'm coming home super drunk and I'm like, okay, like what are the steps? Like I don't know, like I have to do it. Like I cannot sleep. It's not working out for me. So definitely really resonates. I think the branding behind it is something that is really important to also like reduce the friction and the barrier to like doing your skincare. Yeah. Especially when we're younger and we actually have good skin. Yeah. We think that we don't have to take care of it, but we actually have to put in the work now to get the results later. Yeah. Yeah. So 100%. I love that. Yeah. And you were not in skincare or beauty before this.
No.
So what were you doing before?
Yeah. So my first job out of college, and honestly all my internships during college were all finance related. When I finally graduated, I was at JP Morgan and I was on their derivatives trading desk. So very different from anything to do with skincare. I was actually the only girl on the desk there. And then pretty soon, I interned on that specific desk for 2 summers. And so you would think that I would know, if I'm going back to this full time, this is definitely what I want to do. But I think the change for me was when it wasn't an internship, there wasn't an end date. And that scared me. And I think that shift, I realized that was what made me realize this probably isn't for me. So I ended up I had grown up in the Bay Area, California. I knew I wanted to start something, but honestly, I had no idea what. So wanted to kind of pivot. I knew that especially trading has slightly different exit opportunities than banking does. And I just thought that I really wanted to get like a more of a startup entrepreneurial experience. Through that, found myself doing a pretty hard pivot. I worked at this company called Ampush, and they did growth marketing for a bunch of direct-to-consumer brands. But they had actually been started by 2 ex-Goldman traders. So when I just talked to them about what they were building, they were really talking about kind of taking that the focus on data and numbers and bringing that to kind of the paid marketing lens, which at the time when they started Ampush was very new. Now you have like a lot of, almost everyone is looking at Facebook ads and meta ads generally in a very like ROAS focused way, but they were kind of one of the pioneers at the time. So I did that for 3 years. And during those 3 years, I actually started 4am. For the last year and a half of me working at Ampush, I was actually working on 4am had been launched a year and a half. We had a year and a half of doing both, and it was tough. But I'm actually very glad that I did that. It would have been, I think a lot of people really think that going full time into something is an easy thing. It's not. And I also think I almost actually think I could have stayed a little bit longer, but that's another conversation. But
wait, I'm curious to know more about like what that moment was. You're like, okay, I'm gonna actually leave now.
Yeah.
And how you made that decision, and what do you regret about leaving too early?
Yeah. I think it's also it's part of it. I will definitely admit is part of it is definitely grass is always greener way of thinking about things. And there's probably so many things that would have happened for 4am that wouldn't have happened, that have happened for 4am that wouldn't have happened had I not been full time on it. But I think I did a pretty decent job of that totally would not have been the case at JP Morgan. Like there was no way I was going to be able to do any sort of job outside. It literally wouldn't have been allowed. Thankfully at Ampush, it was a very entrepreneurial environment. And they had always touted for their talent was that most people from there were going on to like be head of growth at another startup or even start their own thing. And the founders are very much entrepreneurial. So I think a startup environment is generally a little bit more friendly towards that. And so my decision to leave was not when necessarily 4am could sustain my life. That's for sure. It was honestly, I felt like I was disappointing both sides. Like I was a manager at the time and I felt like the people who were working underneath me just like were not getting the best experience. And I felt a lot of guilt from that, as much as I probably could have like pushed that along. I just truly felt bad for these younger people who were starting their first job out of college and I was their manager and I was like kind of like, go do it, and not being super responsive. And I just like mentally didn't like that feeling. And then secondly, I think for 4am, I felt like I was always just catching knives and not necessarily, I had never, for the first year and a half of business, there had never been any, I mean, there's barely still like any sort of plan ahead of time, but there was anything that we did was like a week and a half in advance. Anything we post, I mean, this is still the case. Now we have like monthly content calendars-ish, but it's always changing. But it was me going on Instagram saying, what should I post on our Instagram today? Because we should post something because we haven't posted in 2 days. It was never any sort of kind of planned out thing or even inventory and everything. Like everything was just, let's just do what we can today. And so I wanted to be able to step back. And honestly, the biggest catalyst was my old job going into office. And I was like, I can't.
Yeah, like how do you do both?
Yeah, it took a lot of like the freedom that I used to have and just honestly wasn't able to do it.
Well, personally, this is my opinion. I don't think there's actually a right time to leave. I actually left with not even a plan of what industry I would be in to start my entrepreneurial endeavors. That is how lost and confused I was when I left. But I think what you said, which was something that I felt very similar, it was like mentally, like I couldn't be there. Like something internally was like not allowing me to show up. And at some point, you kind of feel guilty about that. And you realize that mental block is not going to actually get you to even figuring out the next phase of your life anyways. And you kind of step back.
Yeah. And I also think for why the choice made sense was also that, I mean, I knew I was highly employable. I mean, I don't know, maybe maybe that's a delusion I have. And maybe if I went and tried to get a job right now, I've heard it's really hard. So, but I basically in my head, I was saying, okay, I'm highly employable. If I need to go get a job, I can. We are still, and we were at like a very much like a growing trajectory on 4am. And that's not something that you can, momentum is very important for a startup, obviously. And so I wanted to, whereas I could leave and come back to the corporate job, I couldn't leave and come back to 4am considering how much we had grown it to that point. So it makes sense.
Timing is very important.
But the grass is always greener. You always wonder, like, should I have stayed longer? That paycheck would have been nice to have like a little bit longer. But whatever.
You can always make more money. But like, you have no idea where 4am would be right now if you hadn't done that.
Yeah.
And it's very successful now. Yeah. So like it makes sense. I think it's also interesting that you went from finance to growth marketing and then skincare brand.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you had learnings from these two previous work experiences you had and like how you actually brought it to your company, if any of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was trading options on S&P and VIX. You don't need to understand any of that just to know that it has nothing to do with what I do now. Like literally nothing. I wasn't evaluating companies. I was evaluating like countries as like indices and whether we would think that there was going to be more or less volatility over the next year or whatever. And doing a lot of derivatives and calculus. Not at all relevant. But I do think as much as I didn't get that many learnings to what I'm doing now, I think it served me in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people nag on like working a corporate job now, and especially at these like bigger banks, etc. But like you can't deny the name brand of those things. And I think it gave us a ton, just like more legitimacy, especially anytime we talk to like potential investors or like anyone. They were like, okay, you're like a legitimate person who can work hard. And it definitely did teach me to work hard. And so I think that was like the number thing I did at GP. And also like I was always a very quantitative person, and so it was helpful. Just like I've always thought like having the numbers down pat for our brand is like very important. I mean, it's super important because I mentioned investors, but we really have not raised very much money, especially in comparison to other direct-to-consumer brands, but we're also profitable now, and that would not be the case if I wasn't good at my numbers. So there's that. And then I think on Ampush, it was actually extremely relevant. We basically ran paid ads and did landing page designs for like pretty much we didn't do all of them for like the entire length of time I was there, but clients we had included Glossier, Casper, Birchbox, Uber. I worked on Instacart's partnership to get them to get more carts, shoppers into the program. So that was like an incredible experience. I think one thing I didn't know about at all going into college was kind of like the agency world. And I think if you're looking for I think I had spoken, basically when I was leaving JP, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I just knew I couldn't be doing that any longer. And I basically went on LinkedIn and I DM'd a bunch of people, not asking them for jobs. It was all actually specifically people who were a year out of college, because that's where I was. And I wasn't sure if I was like, I don't really like my life, but maybe that's just, you're not supposed to like your life a year out of college, and that's fine. And if that's what I need to get through, that's fine. And I'm willing to do that. But I just wanted to see,
know that it gets better. Or like you're going towards something.
Exactly. I wanted to know if there were other people who were a year out of college who maybe they liked their job and they thought it was also paying them decently well and would give them exit opportunities that they were excited about. Because I saw my exit opportunities, and it was that I could be either a trader at another big bank or at a hedge fund. That was what every single person did pretty much. So, and I knew that wasn't what I wanted. And so, and through that, I spoke to actually a lot of people at startups, like, and I remember, and I'd always thought, okay, I really want to work at a startup, or I was like, I really want to work at a VC fund. And the one, it's like fairly hard to break into VC fairly early on. And especially now as a founder, I see why. Like, I used to be like, oh, like, I should be able to get into VC. Now, as a founder, I don't really take much. I love young VCs, but they have no idea what they're talking about. And so, like, and I think 100%. As a founder, it's like, I totally see why it's a game that people, I actually think, should be kind of maybe at the very bare minimum start their own company and do it for like a year or two. So that didn't really pan out. And then I spoke to a bunch of people at different startups, and the company I ended up working at, and it was a startup. But for example, I spoke to someone who worked at Drizzly, and I was like, oh, do you feel like you're learning how to like start a business one day, blah, blah, blah. She's like, I guess sort of, but I feel like I know a lot about alcohol delivery now, but do I know about how to build a company? Probably like not that much. And so I had a little bit of fear of like concentration risk of really only learning about one thing if I joined like an early stage startup. So the company I ended up working for was a marketing agency, but it was more startup-y, and it was kind of a good meld of both. And what I liked about it was kind of similar to consulting, where you were put on different projects, and I saw really big companies, really small companies, and all in between, and kind of that was what really helped me see of like how different things were run, et cetera.
Yeah. I love that you like literally just messaged people and were like, what's the story here? Like, tell me like the meaning of life. Yeah. And it's so interesting how many people you talk to and you ask them if they like their job, they will most probably say no. Yeah. And there's this mindset around, do you work to live or do you live to work? And understanding the type of person you are is really critical to knowing the answer to that, because I don't know about you, but I just don't believe there's a dream job. Like everything that actually has a decent enough paycheck comes with pros and cons. Yeah. No,
I totally agree. It's like, I think about it the same way of like, okay, bonds, and maybe this is too far, but bonds have a very like low rate of return because it's not super risky, and like you're investing in a growth stock and it's very volatile, but you have a high, like, I think any job is similar. And I think about now of, oh, like I wish I had started I don't know, like I wish I'd done makeup, because makeup is easier to sell online because you can kind of see it more immediately than you can skincare. But then if you have makeup, then you need a bunch of different shades. Like you can't just have like 4 SKUs, you have to have 50. So like every single, or like there's different, oh, I wish we did food because there's way more retailers. Whereas like in beauty, there's like the big guys of Ulta and Sephora, and then like everyone else is kind of like this very much smaller game, whereas there's so many mom and pop grocery stores or whatever. There's more than just 2. So I don't know. So every single like business, there's pros and cons to, or even a lot of people like the flexibility of being an entrepreneur, but then you never get to have time off. So it's like this whole thing.
Totally. You just have to ask yourself, like, what are the pros and cons you're willing to do? And you just can't, like, get rid of the cons altogether. Yeah. No, that's actually really interesting. And I feel like it's very similar. Like, I'm not building a consumer brand or, like, a skincare company.
Well, I actually always think, I think a lot about how I think the content creator route, because I think about there's 2 hard things in business, or at least there's many hard things in business, but for, like, a lot of businesses, the 2 hard things is inventory and, like, cash flow. And people. If you're a content creator, you don't deal with either of those, because the one person is you and there's no inventory.
I mean, you said it, not me. Like, I didn't say it. I love doing what I'm doing for a lot of those reasons. I'm solopreneur till I die. Like, that is my mission, my motto. Not because I don't think that my company can scale to a point where it would need employees. I just believe that's like kind of the closest to a dream job. Yeah. Like, you don't actually have to respond to anyone. Yeah. And a lot of people get fulfillment from that leadership and from like creating that vision. But I personally like don't, or I feel like it takes more from like the creativity on the day-to-day basis and the control that I can have over my life. Like you said, like as an entrepreneur, if you have a physical product and you have inventory to get out, like you can't really take time off. Yeah. If you're a content creator or a solopreneur, you actually kind of can, ironically. So but then the pros and cons is like, am I ever going to make as much money as, let's say, like selling physical product? Yeah. Probably not, right? Like, well, I mean, it depends, but the likelihood of that is like much smaller. Yeah. So again, there's still that like con of like,
but probably of wasting a lot of money starting a business and then having it fail there's a lot less risk in being a content
True, and like there's no money up front in this field.
So much money in inventory.
No, it's so interesting, and that's a big reason why like I really believe in like media. And I mean, you've heard this Andreessen Horowitz quotes, which is like the next decade, like tech is going to eat the world. And I think in the next decade, I think media is actually going to eat the world, because we're realizing that it's so difficult to find in your customers and get them to listen and care about you. There's so many commodity products in skin and beauty in a way that there didn't used to be in tech, because tech actually was like very hard to build. But with AI, tech is actually becoming pretty commoditized. And I could say that like there's more entrepreneurs than ever before. So more of these B2B tech businesses are skewing towards more consumer and like how you would actually grow a consumer company with a physical product. And those lines are really blending. And it's really interesting, because so much of the learnings that I get from consumer tech founders versus B2B founders building SMB products versus literally physical products, consumer, like they're all doing the same problems.
So you're seeing like a lot of these B2B founders starting to build personal brands on like Twitter, et cetera. And I think we're slowly seeing I think it's going to be personal brand is going to be the one differentiator going forward, because very similar to what you said, you just can't, I don't think you'll be able to differentiate as much even on like the tech, et cetera. But
yeah, and you have a really strong personal brand. You have hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok. So can you share more about how that's actually impacted your business, and like how do you maintain the balance between like, hey, I'm a day-to-day, like, and I'm an entrepreneur for my company, and this is what my brand represents, versus like this is my personal brand, and like where does that differentiate, and like how do you balance the two?
Yeah, so I mean, your first question of how did it impact our company, I mean, it's like huge. I think I had private socials prior to starting the brand. I only made them public literally when we launched. And that's a really big regret for me, because I think a lot about if I were to start over again, I would have built a personal brand first and then build a company off of that, and it would have been so much easier. Just because I think when you launch a company, you just think, oh, like I'll post it, like you're like, okay, I'll make this really cool product, it'll be really cool, and then I'll post about it, and people will find the posts that I posted about it. And like doesn't really work that way. Like sometimes you hear some stories of like their first ever post about it went viral. Wasn't us. We definitely had some viral posts in the beginning. But even in
those moments, like one hit wonder, like you still have to recreate that.
Exactly. And so I think the reason I started my TikTok was really because, I mean, one of the bigger reasons I actually started consistently posting on it was because I remember we had a big launch month, we did really well, and then like we had like a couple more months of like decent sales, but then it kind of like trickled off for sure. And I think it was because one, our whole ethos around our products is like we're not launching a million different SKUs, and that's where most businesses get a lot of their growth year over year. It's not by like making amazing new content and reinventing the wheel like 10 times over. It's that they're launching new products all the time, and that's how you bring people in. That's like great, but it's just not really our model. And where was like, I don't know, where I think I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, and so I think having starting posting on TikTok was really just like out of pure necessity of we need a free way to reach more people, and it seems like people are reaching there on here. Why I did it more on like my personal side versus like the brand account, what I could see was doing well on TikTok was like just quantity of posts. And I just found it easier to do a lot of quantity when it felt like it, when it was my thing, versus everything that I want. Like, I think our brand is so beautiful and is so specific. And as much as like, I want to like make it everything casual and have everyone see everything single side of that, like I still want it to be a beautiful brand that stands on its own. And so I didn't want this messiness of trying everything to be with the brand. And then it was also just fun. It's like easier to think of personal content. And sometimes maybe they'll follow, maybe I'll have a video that does really well and it's like a personal thing that doesn't mention 4 a.m. And then because of that, someone will follow me and then see the 4 a.m. content that maybe doesn't always do as well. Sometimes it does better, sometimes it doesn't, but you know what I mean.
Totally. And it's important to have the cohesive brand image so that people understand what they're buying into.
Exactly.
And it's too much for you to represent that constantly. Like, you're a multifaceted person beyond your company. Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense. And in reality, people follow people. Like, people don't really follow companies. So it makes a lot of sense that you went in that direction. I'm sure this has happened to you before, because this happened to me many times, where I will actually get a viral post, but I will get less conversions than maybe a post that did much lower in views, but then ended up being like way more converting. So curious how you think about converting content versus viral content, and like, how do you balance the two?
Yeah, and we've definitely seen that. Like, I remember back when Euphoria was big, there was a scene where Cassie, who's played by the Sydney Sweeney, yeah. And she, like, in this manic episode, started, like, waking up at, like, literally the scene in Euphoria was the alarm going off at 4 a.m. every morning and her doing, like, a million different steps of her beauty routine.
I remember this.
And so, like, remixed that. And it was, like, perfect. We made it, like, that night. It was the peak of Euphoria. It was our name. It was, like, and we were like, you can be up at 4 a.m., but you can still have a skincare routine, but you don't need to do all that, Cassie. And that did over 1 million views, but yeah, basically drove like little to no sales. So definitely, and then we'll have a video that gets 20,000 views and does like 50 times more sales than that 1 million view video. So it totally does not have to do with viewership. I just think at the end of the day, it's a mix of both. And I think one thing I try to teach myself is that I think the number one thing is just pure quantity, and any way you can decrease your gate to making just output. And so when I think about TikTok, and the main thing I always think about is, like, even if a video flops, gets 1,000 views or whatever it may be, that is 1,000 more views than you would have gotten had you not posted it at all. So who cares? Like, it is very easy to make things feel like a waste of time, but it's not.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Like, I actually agree with you, because I think, like, overthinking how do I get this to convert is actually going to take more time than just putting the quantity. And I don't even know if there's like an exact science or formula to it. There's so many things out of our control that like make that happen.
And I think that all the time people ask, like, oh, like, how do I get started on TikTok, and how do I start posting or any sort of social media? And I'm definitely not an expert on Instagram or anything, but I find that even if it's not even, if I put more things, like, the algorithm will see me more times, and like 1,000 views is 1,000 views. You can totally see when someone makes a lot of content. Like, you can see it in the videos. They're talking, at least on TikTok, they're talking faster, the cuts are faster, the B-roll's better. And you do not get that any other way than solely just putting content out there. And same thing for, like, what's going to do well for me. What does well for me might not do well for you. There are definitely, like, hacks, but all those hacks end up being short-lived. Like, I think, like, series are doing, as you can tell, series are doing incredibly well on Reels right now. It gets people to follow you, etc. And how you were able to do that is because you're making lots of content, and then you see it. And then you're like, oh, this does well. Let me tweak it and do it slightly differently in a way that I think will do better now, because it's, okay, this is like more self-helpy and people want to save stuff that helps them, and then they'll follow for that. And so I think the iteration is what is like, it's that you learn to iterate, and that's what the quantity helps with. It's not just pure numbers and gaming and algorithm.
100%. And also, like, it's baked into your routine. So when, like, in your case, when you saw that Euphoria moment, it's already baked in your routine. You're already making content that day. You can actually seize that moment. And, like, tap into that virality. And it's really, really so important. Like, it's funny because you mentioned the thing, because I got a lot of people saying, oh my God, you blew up overnight. Like, the, like, oh, you went from, like, you basically got 100,000 followers within like a month, and like that's in theory like overnight success. But it's like, no, I posted multiple times a day, sometimes 5 times a day for 6 months straight, and that was what allowed me to seize that moment. That when that moment came for me, I actually put out great content because I spent those 6 months trying to become great. Yeah. And that is by no means overnight success.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really important that people realize that like you can't game the system. There is no like formula. And I would say that what used to work 6 months ago literally does not work anymore because people get fatigued. It's obvious. And like they're looking for something new. And I think it's very difficult to like wake up one day and be like, I'm going to be super creative. Yeah. But I really believe in like energy transfer through the camera. Yeah. And I think that if you prepare for the moment, it takes away from that candor and that authenticity. But if you are like, I'm just going to accept that I have to put out multiple pieces of content and it's part of my life, it kind of like takes away the pressure and the overthinking that allows the right energy transfer. That it's like you said, it's like something could work for you and not for me because of literally just the way you said it. Yeah. And that your energy in the moment that you actually have no control over. Yeah. It's just about you showing up. Yeah. Totally. No, I really resonate with that. How do you actually work with other influencers? Because I know a lot of your sales are from your personal account. And there's tons of like skinfluencers or people who talk about skincare.
Yeah, I think it's hard because we work with influencers in a couple of ways. We actually have almost never done any sort of like paid collaborations with influencers, and I know people will have like different feelings about that. The only times we've done it has been like literally a collaboration with someone where we launched a product in conjunction with them, and that was actually all rev share. It wasn't even anything paid up front. And I think for us, I just know what influencers are getting paid by like Shiseido, by Kiehl's, etc. And like we cannot compete. And so it was really important for us to kind of think of different ways of doing things. And so what we actually first started off like, and we've kind of laid off this like a little bit, but not even for a good reason, honestly. But when we first started, we did a bunch of in-person events. And basically we were able to do those like at super low cost. Everyone would always be like, how did you afford this? Because events are known to be super expensive. They don't have to be. We would always get alcohol sponsors, so we're never paying for the bar. And then we would always, I go out too much and I have a lot of friends who are bar owners, and I would ask them if I could use the space on an off night. We would never have a party on like a Friday or Saturday. It was always like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, because those are the nights where the bars needed people and it was not a big night for them. So we could get the space for as little as possible. And then we would basically have these like decks of like, here's the people who's going to post about your venue, etc., and show that to the venues before doing anything.
And how would you get people to post about it?
It wasn't a promise. It was really...
these are the people we're inviting.
These are the people who are inviting, who might post about you guys. And
I like that strategy a lot.
Yeah. And we basically did all of our events for like less than $1,000. And we were doing them really early on, like right when TikTok was like sort of first becoming like first time when like New York TikTok girlies was like becoming a thing. Like that's when we were posting, and like those people had not been invited to events before, and we were like some of the first brands inviting to them.
And we're kind of getting out of COVID.
Exactly. And so it was like the first time that all these people who had kind of like gotten fame during COVID, but like had never gone to reap the benefits of like going out together and meeting them in person. So that was like really our focus. And when we put together our events, it was actually not about getting content at the parties themselves. I always like wish I had a little more content from them. It was really about making it a fun party. We had a very good mix of like downtown club rats and influencers and just like interesting people. And I think that I became like friends with a bunch of people who were already making content, and I think building those relationships early on was what really helped us. And then I think just seeding really good product.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it takes you to realize a moment in time and an opportunity, and then saying, hey, like, how can I actually leverage this for my skincare brand, which at the time seems completely unrelated, but you have to like kind of have that like intuition and foresight as a founder to see that.
Exactly.
So I think it's really important for people to like constantly be looking at like what's trending, what are people looking for, what do they need, and like how can you fill that problem in that moment, because most likely the thing that people are struggling with in a moment may be completely unrelated to a brand, but there is a creative way to mash it together and reap benefits for your brand directly about. And then I think you got featured in Vogue for this and also like Forbes and businesses. So tons of press. How did you get that press?
So press is completely relationships based, and all that press was actually, we don't have a PR agency. We did have a PR agency for like 4 months, and during those 4 months we got no press, and it was horrible investment, and they actually let us out of our contract early because it went so poorly. All of our press came from personal reach outs from me and my co-founder Sabrina, and so for our and so I think it was lucky in that like I had a lot of existing relations with like people I went to college with were now writers, etc. And it was really about why not? Like aren't all parties on a Friday or Saturday? And he's like, no, because like that's our off time. We want to go to an event on like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday
when they're working.
where we can get out of work early because we're going to this event that's for work, but like so have it be from 5 to 7. Have it be send people like all the invites like 3 weeks in advance, send like X number of follow-ups. And we basically invited literally anyone we knew. Like it was a lot of reaches. Like I think in the Vogue article, it was like we had like Matt James, who was like on The Bachelor, who we had met like in Miami like 2 months before. It was like total reach to invite him. It was very nice of him to come, but like very vague. Like it was definitely a clout chasey, like, oh, if you know someone, like asking everyone to like invite their like semi-influencer-y friend. Like it was despy. But I think as a result, we actually got like a really fun crew, and I think it was this sort of luck of having, and then we had to pay for BFA to cover it. That's the only time we've ever paid for BFA, but it was worth it because that's what all the that's what all the magazines, etc. If you want to get it in there, like they have everything posted the next morning at 8 a.m. edited for you, and everyone can get their photos. You can send that over to them. You send them a little press release. Here's what's in attendance. Here's blah, blah, blah. It's definitely a lot of luck. But I think it's also nurturing like relationships. Like I would literally will still to this day, like I will DM editors, be like, hey, do you want to go to dinner? And like, I would love to like, just like learn more about you, get to know you. And then we also like give them 4 a.m. And like a lot of times you see coverage happen after we go to dinner and I pay for your dinner.
Yeah. I mean, it's power of networking, right?
Yeah.
I feel like there's feeling that people have of like, oh, like Jade just knew people. Like she just knew people. Like, no, actually you're hustling. Yeah. You're messaging people you don't know. Yeah. You're literally putting yourself out there. You're like, shit, this sounds desperate. Like I just gotta do it, and like you don't look at it. And then that moment is created. And then you spend that time really nurturing. Like that doesn't come for free, and that doesn't come from being born into something or like having that network. Like you actually have to go and create it. But at the end of the day, like you can do all the work to networking, but if you don't actually have a party that's fun and you come with a good attitude and you actually treat them respectfully and make them feel like they have that value, that relationship's not going to get nurtured.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people think about, and I think that's what went wrong when we did have like a PR agency for a bit. It wasn't a personal reach out. It was not like for everything before that, I was personally reaching out and they were hearing from founders. And I think that as much as it seems like if you can be a founder and not be unprofessional, like it's one thing. I'm sure these people are getting a lot of reach out from like kind of like from founders, but who aren't super polite over email, don't know. Like, for example, at the top of your subject line, when you're inviting to someone at an event, you should have the subject line be like invite, the date, and like have something that sounds one, so that they know it's an event and an in-person thing, because then they're more likely to open it than just like another pitch, because they want to go to a party, not like, here's another thing that, please, can you write about this?
Yeah. That's so real. Actually, like, my highest open rate and click-through rate for my newsletters is 100% when I say you're invited to, and you just say what it is. It's so simple. That's actually really good advice for people who want to throw events. And I also totally agree that events can be very low budget. I have never paid $1 for an event. I've thrown massive events. I do them multiple times a year. And it's very simple. Like, you have to give someone value in return, and they'll be willing to budget for it, sponsor it, whatever. And alcohol brands is really smart. Like, they're always like, they are looking for places to really get their product out. And it's really in those specific scenarios, can they do a good job of doing that?
And I think the big thing is having a deck. This is like our biggest thing of how we got. I remember we hosted an event with 818, and this was before they had done any co-branded events in New York. This was like when 818, like, do you remember when it was like really hard to get? Like, everyone was like, oh, I like was doing Instagram videos of them trying it, because like everyone thought it was like this like different tequila, or like, so everyone thought that it was like this different. I mean, it's nice tequila, but it like, it's not. I remember people were like, oh, it tastes so different. Oh, there's no aftertaste. Like, there's definitely some aftertaste.
Just like building the hype.
No, but I do love 818. But I remember we got connected to their or actually I went to an event, and they had done the bar at another event. And I asked the girl who had hosted the event, I was like, hey, do you think you could give me the email address of like anyone who does partnerships at email? She was like, yeah, here's their email. And it's like one thing to send an email of like, oh, I'd love to partner together. If the brand is bigger than you, like, bad idea. You have to put together, we were like, hey, we are throwing this late nights, early mornings party. We want it to be 4 a.m. X818. And it was like a deck of here's where it's going to be. Here's the potential date. Here's what the invite will look like. And here are the people that are going to come. Was any of this like confirmed? No. But, and like, it was like the ask was, hey, we just want you to have the bar, and like, we'll provide, like, there'll be like a little backtrack with 818, and we can invite our network. And then they were like, oh yeah, for sure. Well, because if I'm them, I'm like, oh great, they're willing to host a co-branded party, and all I have to do is give them product. Like,
also it's like fake it till you make it. Like, the people will show in 818 signs, and 818 thinks that they're interested in it if people show, and it's like the chicken egg, and you just have to like trust yourself that it'll work out if they say yes, and just say it's already happening. It's already happening with or without you. Is so critical to get a brand to like think
and get them to have it be super low effort. Like, I don't want to get an email from someone that's like, okay, like, hey, like, even if someone a really cool brand, hey, like, let's collab somehow. I'm like, no, you do the thinking. You come to me with an idea, and like, if it's a yes, then we can go. And then like, I think like the brainstorming of collab, like, obviously like brainstorming within you, like your team, but brainstorming with like external people is like very difficult. And like, just come up with an idea. If they don't like the idea, or if they like the idea with a different tweak, totally fine. But no one's going to, I think people's time is very valuable. And that's something that people don't appreciate now, is also that like other people's time is valuable.
Yeah. I mean, any message you send, you have to make it really easy. Like, even if it's as simple as you want like an informational chat, I literally say, last line, put the days you're free, or send them a calendar link, or make it like so simple for them to say yes, because if you make it hard for them, there's literally no incentive for them to in some ways do you that favor.
Exactly.
I really also like that you like made a deck, because I think people think, oh my god, I have spent so many hours to make this deck, and this brand could totally say no, but you could just kind of tweak the brand and like send it to a bunch.
Exactly.
Like, that hard work is going to go a very long way. And you can guarantee a yes if you send it to enough brands.
Exactly.
So I really like the idea of a deck. That's really smart. I'm curious if you actually have funding for 4 a.m. or if you're fully bootstrapped.
We have less than $200K in funding, and majority of that is from small $5,000 to $15,000 like angel checks, and that's over the course of 3 years. So it wasn't that we launched. I mean, I don't know if people like. I talk to most consumer founders that I talk to, and it's not a solo business, and it's not, and it's someone's full-time thing. People are like, that's not very much money. But I think I know a lot of like podcasts where people are like, oh, that's like so much money. I can't imagine having that much. but that's also over 3 years, and that's all the funding that we've ever gotten over 3 years. So, yeah.
Have these investors been like strategic for you? How have they helped you with your business, or maybe they haven't?
A couple strategic. I think it's mostly been, but like not like they're always like in the space. Like actually, almost all of our angels are founders, which I think there's a reason for that. I think it's that we, I think we've done like not a traditional. I think when we launched in 2021, and like at the time, like around then was like, and right before then, it was like very easy to raise for direct to consumer brand. But I think because me and Sabrina were like first time founders and very young, we didn't get a VC fund on board or whatever. And I think since we built so much from scratch, I think a lot of other founders are like, oh, I don't know how you did that with so little money.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know like the intricate details of your business, but I would say not raising is actually probably beneficial to you because
100%.
You already figured out all the hard things.
Yeah.
Like at this point, it's going to be whatever your exit opportunity is in the future or wherever you take the brand, you'd rather just share less with people at this point because they're unlikely to really add that much value at the point in the business that you're at. So
no, I mean, I see like a lot of brands who've like it's like very easy to get like imposter syndrome over like I recently went to like a founder conference and I was actually the only person who had not raised venture capital or any sort of funding. And like I would think of what we have as akin to like a friends and family round. But all of them were like half of them had never like made any money. Like none of them were profitable. All of them were losing money. All of them were prepping for when they're next going to raise.
I mean, you're just going to build a bigger,
and I was
better
like,
product with that fire under your ass.
And like when I said that we were profitable, they were like, what? And I think people, and I definitely like, I don't know if that's always going to be, I think like if we were to launch in like large retail, we'll need additional investment just because it's something that you kind of get one shot at. But I also think I really like my life now. I do send an investor and one of the best things that we do is we send an update to anyone we've ever talked to with regards to fundraising. And then there's a separate that goes to our actual investors, but to keep them, and it's just like, oh, here's the challenges for the month, here's the wins, and here's what we're looking forward to.
I'm sure so many opportunities come out of you sending that.
So many. And
I'm obsessed with that. I love that.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, it's not a big lift. It probably takes me like 2 hours a month if I actually like focus on it. If 2 hours of like full focus.
And it's probably all the stuff you're already thinking about.
It's already
need help on.
It's just exactly. And then and I'll also put in asks there of like, oh, like we're looking for a fractional CFO. Like if anyone has like anyone, and everyone replies to that and all these like, and so it's definitely, so like, yeah, it's not something I'm saying no to, but I think for now, like we don't need it. And I also think it's not like a tech business. Like I think brands take time. I think especially when you're telling a story and you're getting people invested in your product thesis, etc. And it's like it's also not like one gimmicky thing. It's like we want to build a suite of products that like, so it's not going to be that like you have this like gimmick that's super easy to sell people on like one time. So
yeah, that makes so much sense. What advice do you have for people who want to break into the skincare beauty industry from like non-traditional backgrounds?
Now, like she met a bunch of people who are like, anytime like something comes up with dating or whatever, they'll be like, oh, you have a dating app, you should, or you're in this space, you should meet this person because she's a founder of a dating app. Like, who cares whether it's launched yet? I mean, there's some pros and cons to that, but I think I would have started just like talking about things before. There's this whole thing of everything needs to be perfect before you start talking about it. And I think forcing yourself to talk about it online is actually a big forcing function of making yourself commit to something. Like I think about this all the time. I think the biggest productivity hack is committing to it in public. So like even for like working out, I remember there was this one time I was like, okay, I'm going to do 100 days of working out. And I literally just posted on my story every day. Like 1 of 100, 2 of 100. I actually didn't make it to 100 days full, but I
probably did more than you.
I made it a lot further.
Yeah.
Because I was so embarrassed that like, not that anyone cares. I actually didn't even announce it. I just started posting, and in the corner I would write like 6 of 100, and like a lot of people would be like, what are these numbers? What does this mean?
Yeah.
And then I would respond and be like, I'm actually just trying to do 100 days in a row.
No, I love that. Put stake in the game, accountability, and like, if you're gonna put it online, like, it's gonna be embarrassing if you don't hit that, and it's gonna like really get you to hustle. And the thing that like the only person who's gonna benefit from that is yourself.
Well, because so many people say that they're gonna post online, but then they're embarrassed. So this is your way to like, and so they don't just rip the Band-Aid off the first one. And it's like, oh, what's more embarrassing? Like posting online, or like you posted online 3 times and then you gave up, and it's like sitting there of you like, I'm gonna do this and not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, and if it doesn't get views, well, guess what? No one saw it.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the whole thing. And I think people think, oh my God, like, this is so embarrassing, got total views. But I mean, we have big platforms, and there's so many things. Like, so many things will never get to anyone. And like, shoot, I didn't think that was bad. I guess
like,
it's bad.
It's over.
Like, whatever. Like, you just move on, you make another piece, and like, you guys have to like get over it. What's been the most surprising thing you've learned about building a community on social media?
I think that's a good question. I'm not entirely
maybe about yourself
sure.
or just about content in general.
I think I realized I like yapping a lot more than I thought I did. Like, I like just giving my opinion. Oh, I think another thing that I think the most surprising thing to me is that putting yourself out there, like that one step, like you don't have to be successful before people like, I mean, I get imposter syndrome all the time. Like at that conference I just spoke about, where I was I think I was the youngest person there. And I'm pretty convinced like the only reason I got that invite was because of our investor updates, because the people invited me on our investor updates, but also because of my like online presence. And then like I had like a founder who's like exited and was like, oh my God, I saw you on the guest list and I was so excited.
Aww.
And I was like, you're excited to see me?
That's amazing.
That like I the entire time I mean and it's definitely a learning process. Like I remember I came out of that weekend having the worst imposter syndrome, and I actually didn't solve it over the weekend. Like the entire weekend I was beating myself up because I felt like I wasn't meeting enough people, because I felt too awkward to come up to people, because I didn't feel accomplished enough to talk to people. And it's not something I've quite solved yet. But
I bet you people that were thinking that about you, like, oh my God, I follow her, like I want to talk to her, I'm nervous, and like you never realize like what you're thinking really just the other person's also thinking. Yeah. But I feel you, because I've been there and I still struggle with too. And I don't even know like how to do it, other than like you literally have to like, I try to say like third person POV, like look at yourself from the outside. Like, are you awkwardly standing right now? Like, that's cringe. Like go. And sometimes I'll like try to think of tricks. Like one trick I have is go stand in the middle of the room. So like that's where the confident people stand, and then they'll come and approach you, and you won't even have to start the conversation. Just like literally go stand there. Yeah. And, like, that's actually interesting. If you could go back in time, what would you tell yourself, your younger self, and what advice would you give her?
You know, I want to say, oh, it'll all work out, but I'm not sure it's all worked out yet. So probably, I think one thing that I've learned over time, so I guess, I mean, maybe I didn't have to learn this, but I think I spent a lot of time caring about what other people thought about me, and I really don't anymore. It's like really crazy. And it's interesting because, like, I think, and it's such a tacky thing, or such a cheesy thing, but I really do think when you stop caring about what other people think, it's like such a freeing experience. Like, I think about it, like, I used to really care. Like, I remember when I left JP, before that, I remember I don't know if you ever like studied for consulting case interviews.
No, but I'm familiar with the grind.
And I remember at Georgetown, all the people who were studying for consulting, they would get these like big like sketch pads to like write through cases that were just like basically like artist notebooks, but they were like big and just had no lines on them. I remember I bought one, and literally like every night, like my roommates probably thought I was insane, and I was like writing pros and cons list of like leaving, staying, and like at one point I got to this like pro and con list, and like one con was for leaving was money, but at the time, actually 1 year into your like finance thing, like it's good money, but it's like not, it would have been much harder to leave like 3 years in versus 1 year in, but other than that, the main major con was people will think you're embarrassed, or like people will think that's like a fail if you leave, or like the prestige aspect of being in like finance or whatever. Also I think I took a lot of pride in being like the only girl on the team. Like I wanted to be the most quantitative. I wanted to be on a quant desk. I wasn't in sales. Like I wasn't in cash trading. Like I was in trading. And like I felt like that was a failure, but I realized like when I actually just didn't enjoy it. So I think really, and the main con that I had to get over was what other people will think. And I was like, that is a really stupid reason to stay somewhere, is because other people will think that you should have stayed.
Yeah. No, it's actually interesting you said that, because I kind of think I resonate, where I also used to care a lot about what people think of me, but ever since I've been online and being seen by so many people every day, have I really internalized how little people actually care about me.
Yeah.
Like you really get the quantification of how little people care about you.
Yeah.
That you realize, oh, if no one cares about me, even after such a massive online presence, then I can just do whatever the fuck I want. Like, it's not that deep.
Yeah, no, I remember, like, there was, like, one video, and it got, like, that I made, and, like, got, like, not so some negative, like, feedback on it, and I remember I was like, I'm canceled. I was like, I am canceled. Like, this is what it feels like to be canceled. And then, like, I remember going to dinner with a friend, and, like, and they were like, how's your day going? I'm like, ugh, other than the cancellation. He was like, oh, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. I just wake up and read 1,000 comments about how I suck and should go die. But I'm glad that doesn't affect you, and you didn't see that.
Yeah. You realize that actually still, even in the massive amounts of being seen, it exists in such a bubble.
Yeah.
Such a tiny little speck.
Yeah.
No, that's so inspiring. And I know, like, we feel like, oh, like we haven't made it yet. There's so much of a journey, but generally there's so many people literally just a year or two behind us looking like I would dream, like die to like, be in Jade's position.
Yeah.
So, but I know you know
maybe.
that. But thank you for coming.
Yeah,
this was so awesome.
Me.